All right, here we are again today. I put up a video the other day. We talked about this wire bender. What I wanted to do is clarify a couple things. So I did a short video. It was probably about a minute and a half, and I laid the horn in there, and it was in there incorrectly. So I'm going to show you this little wire bender here. I'm going to bend a horn. I'm not going to braze it, but so these are my little bushings for the horn. This is a K&S bender. So what I've done is actually expanded upon this to where I can bend different horns at the exact width. Let's see, I set my horn down here somewhere. Come over here and get this horn for you. Could have been a little bit better prepared. So anyway, got to remember to get the bushings on it before you bend it. So this is set up here. I think it's 1.5 inches. Whatever it is. 1.5 inches, I've got it marked. So when you design this bender, the way it's set up here, you're locked into a certain wire dimension, because what has to happen is this has to wedge in like this. It goes in like this. Okay, so this pin right here does nothing but stabilize the wire right here. This is the one that you're actually bending the wire around. This is 3/32. So if I design this bender to do flap horns at an 1/8 inch, basically this post would be farther apart from this post. So you want these two posts here, you know, to be not tight, but I mean you want it to be snug to where there's not any slop or very little. And these pins here, these are the pins I bought. These are the 1/4 inch. So if you were going to make a K&S bender, you know, you'd want the 1/4 inch pins. Let's see, this is it's called Brighton. There's a product number, alloy dowel pins. They're hardened steel. If you buy a box of these, it'll last you 5 lifetimes. So here's the K&S bender. It's got this bigger dowel pin here and the 2 smaller ones here. And this is just a crap old piece of junky steel. It was out of a machine shop. Nothing special about this, cold rolled steel. Or if you're looking for this steel, you can go to metal superstores or supermarkets, metal supermarkets. They sell small quantities of bar stock and tubing and a lot of the things that we could use. So anyway, once you get this thing set up with the bushings and your horn, and you don't have to worry about anything being on center, because that's all done when you braze it. And there's another video I've got that actually shows the brazing of these horns. So with this, all you do, I leave a lot of extra. Lock this vise down better. You bend one side, And you slip it back in here. Oop, get that rotated. And if it's not perfectly lined up, you can always tweak it. And you just come around here and you bend this side. And this one needs to go a little bit more. Let's put that back in there. And depending on the wire, I mean, you double check and make sure everything looks about right. Just bring it in there a little bit. But the advantage of this wire bender like this, it's a repeatability. Let's say you're doing horns and you wanted them all to be the same. It's a really quick way of doing it. It's cheap. I mean, the dowel pins and the scrap piece of steel. So that's pretty much it. I'll refer you to the video where you can look it up. It's silver brazing control horns. I've got a whole video on setting this up in a jig and brazing it. What that jig looks like real quick. It's this thing here. This is the jig that actually holds the horn like this between these metal plates. This right here holds it at 90 degrees with a magnet. So you get all this set up, you know, where you want it. And this will lock it all in place. And then you braze it. So that's how that works anyway. It's really simple. But I'm not sure if K&S still sells their wire benders or not. At one time they sold the small bender. This was a coil. It would do a coil for like a landing gear. And then they had this one. This was a bigger bender for like 1/4 inch up to 1/4 inch. For control line purposes, the small bender is what we use, or I always use the most. This will do 3/32 or 1/8 inch right here. If they don't make them, I'm not sure if they still make these wire benders, but they're easy to make if you get the dowel pins. Now, MSC Industrial Supply or McMaster Car or a machine shop, or you might Google that. I don't know. I bought these years ago, so I'm not sure if that number's still relevant or not. So obviously here you trim the wires however long you want. So that's just a quick overview of how the bender works. Yesterday when I set this thing up, I had the horn sitting here like this. I mean, that was backwards. I had the camera in one hand and did it quick, so this should clarify it. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about, I'm going to go over some composite stuff. I don't want to bore you too much with too much composite stuff, but I wanted to cover a couple things that I hadn't covered before, and it has to do with some of this composite stuff. So what I did, I made this, got this wheel pant plug all fixed up, and it's not perfect. You know, there might be a pinhole, and you know, there's really tiny blemishes in it, but you know what? It's good enough. And if you have a pinhole or indentation or something in the plug and you make the mold off of it, it's really easy to sand the little nib off that the defect when you polish the mold. I used to go ahead and just take the molds and use them as they came off the PVA. But, you know, since then, I mean, I've gotten in the habit of coming in here and sanding, and you can buff and polish these molds. This was a mold that was made, it was for a scoop on a trailer for an air vent. And it's high temp. And one of the problems I had with this, you wouldn't think it would flex, but once I heat cured it, it bowed in a little bit. So it's still a usable mold. So all I've got to do is probably make a box to set it in and then flare this out like this to get it back in this shape. It's not critical, you know, it's just a scoop. Okay, so this mold I've got in front of me, the reason why I wanted to cover it, it's all out of West Systems. And a lot of this tooling I've made before had a high temp gel coat, and a lot of that gel coat is out of the reach of a lot of people. You got to buy so much of it, it's expensive. So the purpose of this little demo here is how to make a wheel pant mold out of readily available West Systems. This mold, this won't take any heat. It might take 120, but it's not high temp. It's the West Systems on the spec sheet, it goes up to like 140, 150 before it starts to deflect or you get problems. So anyway, this was my attempt of showing you how to make that. And one of the things I didn't cover before is the DTO81. This is sort of like a sand mixture. And I'll get a good video of this here in a minute. So what I'm going to do is build this mold up with DTO81. So I guess if you have, you know, the plug, and the plug is, you know, like this. So you're going to build this up. You put your gel coat in. And then the next step is fill the corners up a little bit. Then you lay some glass cloth on. Come in here with a glass cloth layer. And then you'll put the DTO81, which is the tooling dough, right here over it. And then more glass cloth. So basically what you're doing is you're building up the mold, not with fiberglass, you're building it up with tooling dough. And here's a good example. These are some molds I made. This one says 20% extra 300. And if you look at this mold, it's very true. The parting line is perfect. So there wasn't any shrinkage. The tooling dough is very stable. So when this mold was made with high temp resin, high temp surface coat, and the tooling dough, it became very stable. It seems like it's overkill. This is probably 3/8 inch thick, but that's where you get the stability like that. Back to this thing, if I would have molded this scoop, instead of putting all this glass and having shrinkage and distortion, if I had used tooling dough, it would have stabilized this tool. So these molds are really good molds. I did a quick overview of this tooling board too. This is a Ren board 450, I think. There's no clear coat on it. There's no finish. It's just sanded with 600, maybe 1,000, and waxed, PVA'd, and then formed the molds. And so that's an explanation of tooling board, but I wanted to do the same thing with West resin here. So one of the advantages of West system, let me back, a little history. Okay. Yeah, the trouble is with making these videos during the week like that, it's everybody's at work, but maybe they'll tune in later, but thanks for coming in. Yeah, the West system, it's really easy with the pumps. I covered a little bit of that on the overview of different things with curing agents. The pumps aren't 100% accurate, but they're pretty close. West system cures really hard. It's got a nice finish on it. This has got one clear coat of West on top of the plug, and that's why it's so shiny. It's almost like a tabletop epoxy in a way. It doesn't have any amine blush on it. Now you can take the West systems and play around with some hardeners. I think you can get some good properties out of it. Working with the West out of the can, the viscosity is pretty thick. I wouldn't be considered a vacuum assisted resin transfer molding type resin, but it's a good hand layup. So let's go ahead and mix up a cup of this West systems. This here, see if I can get this in the view here. This is the hardener. And I'll show you what I'm talking about with this pump. And when you see right there, you get a lot of air. Just take a little bit right there. And it should come out about right. Like I said, this stuff isn't super critical here because it's just a wheel pant, but so that's your 20% mix by weight or volume according to the pumps. And this West is what I've got coated here. That's what I put on last night. And it was PVA, it was wax PVA. That's the green tint on some of it. Some of that's putty, but and then the West system's right over the top of the PVA. Okay, now one of the things I like to do is when I stir this resin up, especially when it's small quantities, I go ahead and finish stirring it with the brush down here in the corner. Want to make sure I get it all mixed. So I do the big mixing with the screwdriver here. A lot of times you'll get stringiness here. We can see that some of the hardener came down the sides. So it'll take 2 cups. Once I get the tooling dough or the DTO 81 mixed in there, I'll probably have to go back and mix up another cup. Okay, this is, and you can sort of tell here, it's like sand. Let me stir that up with a brush like I said I was going to do. Get down in there. Try to get the brush hairs out of there. Probably doesn't matter with this stuff, but okay, now pour this in there. As you watch it, it's very fine. It's like a phenolic. This resin will take a lot more filler than you think it will. So right now, you know, we're still looking at a runny viscosity. Put more of this in here. The nice thing about having this DTO81 is its shelf life is forever, I guess. You know, we'll keep it dry. The other thing is it allows you to vary the viscosity of whatever you're doing here with the mold. You can make this stuff so full of this DTO81 you can grip it in a ball like a piece of Play-Doh. So you can run it thin, you can run it thick, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. If you had to sand it, I think it sands fairly easy. I mean, it's not like micro balloons, but it's, you know, it's machinable and sandable. You could almost put micro balloons in it. So right now we're getting into this consistency. That's what I'm looking for right now. And what I'm going to do with this, I want to make sure I fill the corner of this mold I'm going to make here. So anytime you deal with composites, it's always the sharp corners that come up and bite you. It's not the flat areas. So I like to take this DTO81, make sure it's worked down in there good, and I create a nice fillet around the part or the plug. Sort of go slow to make sure you get it all down in there. Sort of see it as you wipe it down in that corner. And then once I get this wiped in there, I'm going to go add more filler to it. And that's when it turns into more like a dough. I guess this would be considered a paste. Sort of flare it out a little bit here. So any place you think you're going to have trouble with the fabric laying down over this plug, go ahead and wipe this stuff on it. This DTO81, you can use it in high temp tooling too. I've used it in some oven cured tools with high temp resins. It's a phenolic, so the temperature that this stuff will handle it's good, at least for what we do with it. Okay, so that's just the fillet, the fillet. So right now got a little bit left. Let's go in here and see if we can get more of a dough consistency. Okay, so now we're coming up with, like I said, more of a, instead of a paste, we're getting into a dough. And let's say that you mix too much and it got too dry for you. Mix up another cup of resin and pour that in there. Now, once I get this dough in, get it smoothed out, relatively smooth, then I'm going to go back with some fiberglass cloth on the top. And I'll probably put some fiberglass cloth against this part of the mold too, I think. So I got a lot of scrap over here. Let me dig through some of this scrap. If you guys were watching a short film or a thing I made yesterday, since I got it in front of me, my science fair project, I polished this up, used free coat on it. Still had to cut this tube off. I ran a Dremel tool down there, peeled it off. Plan B today, I've got some Mylar coming. So I cooked this to 350 with this HTR 250 and cooked it good at 350 for an hour and let it cool down. So I mean, this is a super hard. It's super good resin. It'll take 350 in a post cure easy. But I wasn't able to slide it off the mandrel. The free coat didn't allow this stuff to stick to it, but it didn't allow enough release with the expansion and contraction for heat to get it to release. And John Jordan, he came into the same problem with these tank molds. So I just wanted to see if I could duplicate what he was experiencing, and I did. So we'll be off to plan B on that. And it's just one of those things where, you know, 2 steps forward and 1 step back with this composite type stuff. You just you really have to just keep messing with it till you get what you want. So I'm going to mix up another cup here. And I'm going to put a little bit of cloth on here. Because like I said, what I want to do, I want a sandwich core. I want cloth, dough, and then cloth. Anytime you separate the 2 layers of cloth, it gets stiffer. It's like a beam, you know. You got fiberglass, cloth, tooling dough, and then more cloth. You try to balance it out still. I mean, if you have 2 layers of glass against the plug, tooling dough, put 2 layers of glass on the other side of the tooling dough. So what we're trying to do with this tooling dough is get away from that warpage like you saw on that part I showed you, that big one. So on that part it's not going to matter, but if you're making a fuselage that's 3 foot long, 4 foot, or a huge part, you got to have stability. You got to have a mold that holds true, and that's what the tooling dough will get you. Hence the thickness of this wheel pant. So that mold was it's as accurate as the day I laid it up. Alright, so I'm going to grab some of this scrap here and just lay on here. If you're worried about print through, this e-glass here, this stuff here is really fine. It's got a really nice finish. So let's grab some of this scrap, lay on here. And I don't think I'm worried about print through on the face of this mold, just for the fact that I've got a good surface coat on there with thick coat of West Systems. And don't worry about weight, or just the main thing to worry about is keep everything balanced so you don't have a warp mold. But I'm just going to show you how easy this stuff wets out. That way you get an idea how this e-glass works. It's probably 1.5 to 2 ounces. Nothing high tech really here. It's just simple stuff. It's I guess you could say the devil's in the details, sort of. It's just when you get into this composite stuff, if you leave something out or change something, it's going to affect the part. Maybe better or worse, but let's see, grab more scrap here. So hopefully I got enough to cover this thing. Now, when I was saving scrap, what I do with these little helmets is make them out of the scrap. That was my use for getting rid of all this stuff. Trying not to let anything go to waste. This stuff here, the e-glass, is probably the most expensive out of all of it that I've used. You're looking at, for this glass, I looked it up the other day, and you're looking like $11.50 a yard. And that's if you bought 100 yards. I think it's more like, the site I was looking at, it's more like 14 or 15 bucks a yard. So one of the things you can do with this light e-glass is when you get to the tooling dough, if it's bumped up a little bit, so you can work that tooling dough down and make it really nice and smooth. So it doesn't really matter when you put the dough down if it's perfect, because like back here it's lumpy. Just pat it down, make it nice. And a lot of this stuff, I'm not showing you anything that you can't find elsewhere, but I've got a few little tips that I wanted to share that hopefully maybe speed your process up, or I narrow it down, try to narrow it down to where the information I give you relates to what we're doing with control line airplanes. So okay, now that I've got the glass down, let's put some of this bigger stuff down. This is heck, who knows what this is. Just sort of wing it here. It's probably, oh, I don't know, 6 ounces, 7 ounces. I got some resin in here. It's got a hard spot. Doesn't matter though on this thing. We're just going to build this up. And like I said, you try to do the same thing top and bottom here. Each side of the tooling dough. See, there's a hard spot right there. Move that out of the way. The other nice thing when you're dealing with this mold making stuff, I got a question here. Yeah, the gentleman asked, thanks for posting, and said, I have a question. If not selling parts, what is the break-even point for regular modelers? The initial output is pretty substantial. I define regular as 2 to 3 models a year. Okay, so that's a good point. So you're looking at this resin and all this stuff you're using to make a part. I was talking to a couple modelers over the years. So let's just say you bite the bullet and you buy HTR 250, and I'm not sure exactly what it goes for now, but let's just say for give or take $20–40, you're looking at $110–120 a gallon for resin. This West system is $120, just the resin, no hardener. Now that's a gallon. Okay, so let's just say you're not going to use too much, so you can buy it. The beauty of this West system is you can go into West Marine and you can buy a quart. You don't have to buy a gallon. So you can buy a quart of resin and and the hardener that goes with it for probably $200 with the pumps maybe. So you got $200 in West Systems. Now what can you do with it? Well, that's it. Let's just say $200 if you go the gallon route. So you can cut that in half with a smaller quantity. So you get this resin. Obviously it'll do this. It'll fuel proof the engine compartment. West Systems will actually sheet a wing. I'd be willing to bet instead of Z-epoxy you could use West Systems with half-ounce cloth, like the Bob Hunt method, where he'd scrape the epoxy on the wood, and then he'd scrape it all off and sand it, and then he'd put 3/4 ounce or half-ounce cloth on it. So it's good for that. Now, as far as a landing gear or a bell crank or something like that, I wouldn't use it. In my opinion, it doesn't have a high enough deflection temperature on the properties. So, could you get your money out of it? Sure could, especially if you don't buy the gallon. Now, if you're in a club and a lot of people are, you want to make parts for, club members, then you go with a gallon. So, but that's the beauty of what I'm showing you today. I'm trying to demonstrate with this wheel pant mold with readily available resins that are accessible. Now, I don't know if they still have it, but Aircraft Spruce and Specialty at one time, they carried a Resin Services HTR 212. Now the 212 is sort of like a 250, but it's lower viscosity. It's got more of a runny state, and it's a high temp. The 212 they were selling was cured with HTR 386, which is a high temp curing agent. So yes, you can get good stuff if you look around that's reasonable quantities, and you can use it in a lot of things. So the HTR 212, you could probably make landing gears and bell cranks out of that. It wouldn't be as good as maybe some of the high temp, but it'll get you up there over 200, so you'll be good. So I'd say it's worthwhile. You'll find a lot of uses for this stuff, and you'll laugh, because with this HTR 250, I've had some guys that needed some work done around the house with some rotten wood, and I had to go over there and fix some window sashes and sills and different things. I dragged the 250 out, put some of this filler in it, and go to town. Now this HTR 250 or this DTO 81 with HTR 250 I used on some rotten posts out front by my front porch where the gutter overflows on them, and they're still good today, and that was probably 20 years ago. So yeah, I've used this stuff to fix rotten wood, fuel-proof compartments, sheet wings. I was sheeting wings with HTR 250, and you could do the same thing with West Systems. And if you're worried about West Systems being too thin to sheet a wing, put some micro balloons in it. Just thicken it up just a little bit so it hangs on the surface a little bit better. You'll be fine. So if you see what I'm doing here, I'm taking this DTO 81 and I'm trying to maintain the right thickness here. Just sort of keep patting it till you get what you want. And this is what I'm looking for right here. Probably, I don't know, fat 1/4 inch or something. And I'll continue on with more. So I got a little resin here left from the cloth. come in here and mix up a little bit more of this. There's no way to ever do this without making a mess. So don't think you're going to come out here in a clean shirt and mix this stuff up. Now, if it's not exactly like, you know, the first batch here, that's all right. We'll get it close. What you want it to do, you don't want it to sag. Once you pat this down, you want it to maintain the shape. And this here is a little bit thinner, a little bit wetter, but it's still working okay. And let's just say that it's too wet. I've done this before. Go like that. It'll sop it in there. And that way it's not sticking to your glove. So you can go back over the top. It's like putting more flour on your dough, you know, when you're rolling the dough out for the cookies or bread. It's starting to stick a little bit, the pizza crust, you just throw more flour on it. So I've got to mix up a little bit more of this West Systems DTO81. And I'm going to continue out here. And I think what I need to do also is save some of that resin I mixed, because I don't need that much filler or dough. I'll probably need some more for the glass cloth that's going to go over the top of this. Don't worry about the lumps too much, because when we get the glass cloth on there, it'll take care of that. And another thing you'll find out, you start going through a lot of cups and brushes. Now once you use these pumps, and it's like the second or the third cup, there's no air bubbles in there and you get the right mix, or a better mix. It's just when you let those pumps sit there, I think Richard or somebody said it drains back in the jug and it drips out the nozzle. So I know he's right after, you know, using them. So I guess what I'm trying to say, when you start the pumps up again to make some resin after a couple days or the next day, you might want to take a shot of that and prime it a little bit, see where you're at. But the beauty of the West Systems, as you can see, it's really quick. You don't have to weigh anything. So I'll stir this up with a brush, get in the corners good. And I just go by the feel. Just keep putting this DTO81 in there. You know, you could almost do some kind of, you could use this to build up a small casting too. One of the things I got over there is some aluminum shot, like little teeny BBs. And I've made some high temp molds where I used the aluminum shot as a filler for high temp. So this is getting pretty close. Dry it up a little bit more. If it's too runny, it's hard to work with. If it's too thick, it doesn't conform that easy. And I'll do a little experiment here since I don't need all this dough. I'm going to show you how thick this stuff will get. talking about, is it worthwhile? You can almost do handle moldings. Yeah. Yeah, Sparky chimes in. He says, I can be a millionaire modeler if I start out with 5. Yeah, that was the old joke at the hobby shop. If you want to make $1 million at the hobby shop, you got to start out with 2 if you want to become a millionaire. Which brings me to the point here, you know, the people, Brent Williams put out a video, Sparky's got videos. I think the whole reason here of trying to put this stuff out there is to keep the hobby growing. It seems like we're becoming farther and farther apart, and as people, as a society, the club attendance, you know, there's not as many people at the flying field and the club, and trying to put these videos out there to where people can consume this information and build up interest. It's a double-edged sword. I remember I had stacks of model aviation magazines 3 foot deep in the office, and I was always worried about throwing some of these things away. Same thing with fine woodworking.